Bihari, Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunda Bihari, Gopi Janavallabha, Jayo Girivaradari, Jayo Girivaradari, Gopi Janavallabha, Jayo Girivaradari, Jayo Girivaradari, Jayo Yashodanandana, Jayo Braja Jana Ranjana, Jayo Yashodanandana, Jayo Braja Jana Ranjana, Jamuna Tiravanachari, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Jamuna Tiravanachari, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Jayo Radha Madhava, Jayo Kunja Bihari, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Nityalila Pravista, Om Vishnu Pad, Paramahamsa, Parivrajacharya, Astatara Sapa Shishimad, Abhay Charanana Vinda, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Jai, Iskon Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Premsa Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Gadada, Shrivas, Adi Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki, Shishi Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhana Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. All glories to assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So I think maybe what I'll do is I'll just go through, unless there's a specific format, I could go through the Sanskrit of each verse and then the translation in purple. I just do it one verse after another. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
Okay. Kamam Bhavasha Pajanya Savakama Dugamahi Sishichu Sma Vrajan Gava Payaso Dasvate Muda. Prabhu, do you also do word for word for each one?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
Okay, fine. So word for word translation, Kamam, everything needed. Vivasha, was showered. Pajanya, rains. Sava, everything. Kama, necessities. Dukkha, producer. Mahi, the land. Shishishchu, sma, moisten. Rajan, pasturing grounds. Gavaha, the cow. Payasha, Payasha Udasvati, due to swollen milk bags, and Mudda, because of a joyful attitude. Translation: during the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira, the cloud showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cow used to moisten the grazing ground with milk. Purport. Thank you. The basic principle of economic development is centered on land and cows. The necessities of human society are food grains, fruits, milk, minerals, clothing, wood, etc. One requires all these items to fulfill the material needs of the body. Certainly, one does not require flesh and fish or iron tools and machinery. During the regime of Maharaj Yudhisthira, all over the world there were regulated rainfalls. Rainfalls are not in the control of the human being. The heavenly king Indradev is the controller of rains, and he is the servant of the Lord. When the Lord is obeyed by the king and the people under the king's administration, there are regulated rains from the horizon, and these rains are the causes of all varieties of production on the land. Not only do regulated rains help ample production of grains and fruits, but when they combine with astronomical influences, there is ample production of valuable stones and pearls. Grains and vegetables can sumptuously feed a man and animals, and a fatty cow delivers enough milk to supply a man sumptuously with vigor and vitality. If there is enough milk, enough grains, enough fruit, enough cotton, enough silk, and enough jewels, then why do people need cinemas, houses of prostitution, slaughterhouses, etc.? What is the need of an artificial, luxurious life of cinema, cars, radio, flesh, and hotels? Has this civilization produced anything but quarreling individually and nationally? Has this civilization enhanced the cause of equality and fraternity by sending thousands of men into a hellish factory and the warfields at the whims of a particular man? It is said here that the cows used to moisten the pasturing land with milk because their milk bags were fatty and the animals were joyful. Do they not require, therefore, proper protection for a joyful life by being fed with a sufficient quantity of grass in the field? Why should men kill cows for their selfish purposes? Why should man not be satisfied with grains, fruits, and milk, which, combined together, can produce hundreds and thousands of palatable dishes? Why are there slaughterhouses all over the world to kill innocent animals? Maharaj Parikshit, grandson of Maharaj Yudhisthira, while touring his vast kingdom, saw a black man attempting to kill a cow. The king at once arrested the butcher and chastised him sufficiently. Should not a king or executive head protect the lives of the poor animals who are unable to defend themselves? Is this humanity? Are not the animals of a country citizens also? Then why are they allowed to be butchered in organized slaughterhouses? Are these the signs of equality, fraternity, and non-violence? Therefore, in contrast with the modern, advanced, civilized form of government, an autocracy like Maharaj Yudhisthira's is by far superior to the so-called democracy in which animals are killed and a man less than an animal is allowed to cast votes for another less than animal man. We are all creatures of material nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord himself is the seed-giving father and material nature is the mother of all living beings in all shapes. Thus, mother material nature has enough foodstuff both for animals and for men. And for men. By the grace of the Father Almighty, Sri Krishna, the human being is the elder brother of all other living beings. He is endowed with intelligence, more powerful than animals, for realizing the course of nature and the indications of the Almighty Father. Human civilization should depend on the production of material nature without artificially attempting economic development to turn the world into a chaos of artificial greed and power only for the purpose of artificial luxuries and sense gratification. This is but the life of dogs and hogs. Okay, verse 5. Nadya samudra gidaya savanaspati virudaha Falanti Oshadaya Savaha Kamam Anvitu Tashavai. Word for word, Nadya, rivers, Samudra, oceans, Girayaha, hills and mountains, Savanaspati, vegetables, Virudaha, creepers, Falanti, active, Oshadayaha, drugs, Savaha, all, Kamam, necessities, Anvitu, seasonal, Tasya, for the king, Vai, certainly. Translation, the rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season paid their tax quota to the king in profusion. Purple. Since Maharaj Yudhisthira was under the protection of Ajita, the infallible Lord, as above mentioned, the properties of the Lord, namely the rivers, oceans, hills, forests, etc., were all pleased, and they used to supply their respective quota of taxes to the king. The secret to success is to take refuge under the protection of the Supreme Lord. Without his sanction, nothing can be possible. To make economic development by our own endeavors on the strength of tools and machinery is not all. The sanction of the Supreme Lord must be there. Otherwise, despite all instrumental arrangements, everything will be unsuccessful. The ultimate cause of success is the Deva, the Supreme. Kings like Maharaj Yudhisthira knew perfectly well that the king is the agent of the Supreme Lord to look after the welfare of the mass of people. Actually, the state belongs to the Supreme Lord. The rivers, oceans, forests, hills, drugs, etc. are not creations of man. They are all creations of the Supreme Lord, and the living being is allowed to make use of the property of the Lord for the service of the Lord. Today's slogan is that everything is for the people, and therefore the government is for the people and by the people. But to produce a new species of humanity at the present moment on the basis of God consciousness and perfection of human life, the ideology of godly communism, the world has to again follow in the footsteps of kings like Maharaj Yudhisthira or Parikshit. There is enough of everything by the will of the Lord, and we can make proper use of things to live comfortably. Sorry, I lost my place. Where was I? Oh, so yeah, comfortably without enmity between man and man, or man and animal, or man and nature. The control of the Lord is everywhere, and if the Lord is pleased, every part of nature will be pleased. The river will flow profusely to fertilize the land. The oceans will supply sufficient quantities of minerals, pearls, and jewels. The forest will supply sufficient wood, drugs, and vegetables, and the seasonal changes will effectively help produce fruits and flowers in profuse quantity. The artificial way of living, dependent on factories and tools, can render so-called happiness only to a limited number at the cost of millions. Since the energy of the mass of people is engaged in factory production, the natural products are being hampered, and for this, the mass is unhappy. Without being educated properly, the mass of people are following in the footsteps of the vested interests by exploiting natural reserves, and therefore there is acute competition between individual and nation. There is no control by the trained agent of the Lord. We must look into the defects of modern civilization by comparison here, and should follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Yudhisthira to cleanse man and wipe out anarchisms. Text 6. Najayo Vyajaya Klesha Deva Bhutatma Hetavaha Ajata Shatrava Bhavan Jantunam Ragni Kahichit. Word for word, na, never, ajayaha, anxieties, vyadayaha, diseases, kleshaha, trouble due to excessive heat and cold, deva bhuta atma, due to, oh, screen changed. Or due to the body, supernatural power, and other living beings, hetavaha, due to the cause of, ajata shatro, unto one who has no enemy, abhavan, happened, jantunam, of the living beings, Rajni, unto the king, Kahichit, at any time. Translation. Because of the kings having no enemy, the living beings were not at any time disturbed by mental agonies, diseases, or excessive heat or cold. Purple. To be non-violent to human beings and to be a killer or enemy of the poor animals is Satan's philosophy. In this age, there is enmity toward poor animals, and therefore the poor creatures are always anxious. The reaction of the poor animals is being forced on human society, and therefore there is always a strain of cold or hot war between men, individually, collectively, or nationally. At the time of Maharaj Yudhisthira, there were no different nations, although there were different subordinate states. The whole world was united, and the supreme head, being a trained king like Yudhisthira, kept all the inhabitants free from anxiety, diseases, and excessive heat and cold. They were not only economically well-to-do, but also physically fit and undisturbed by supernatural power, by enmity from other living beings, and by disturbance of bodily and mental agonies. There is a proverb in Bengali that a bad king spoils the kingdom and a bad housewife spoils the family. This truth is applicable here also. Because the king was pious and obedient to the Lord and sages, because he was no one's enemy, and because he was a recognized agent of the Lord and therefore protected by him, all the citizens under the king's protection were, so to speak, directly protected by the Lord and his authorized agents. Unless one is pious and recognized by the Lord, he cannot make others happy who are under his care. There is full cooperation between man and God and man and nature, and this conscious cooperation between man and God and man and nature, as exemplified by King Yudhisthira, can bring about happiness, peace, and prosperity in the world. The attitude of exploiting one another, the custom of the day, will only bring misery. Okay, so I'll do the Mangala Charles prayers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you, devotees, for inviting me to say a few words on these last 3 verses we just read out the translation and the purports for. There's many points here that Srila Prabhupada refers to, many points that for those of us that have been around in Krishna consciousness and ISKCON will be very familiar with. Like Prabhupada stresses these points many, many times over and over again, this idea of simple living, higher thinking, protecting the cows, karma, how that there's a superior control over Mother Nature. And unless we understand that, respect that, and work according with that, then essentially we'll end up damaging one another and damaging Mother Earth. It's a common phenomenon in mankind, everywhere, every society, that humans try to look for a situation which is akin to having heaven on earth. Many books, many films. I remember when I was younger, there was a book called The Island. And beyond all the details, essentially the point that the author is trying to make is it's impossible to make heaven on earth. That even if you have all the resources, even if you're away from all your problems, just being amongst one another, we have this natural tendency to exploit one another, to have lust, to have anger, to have greed. And actually heaven on earth is just impossible. But what these verses and what Srila Prabhupada is saying through the purports is it is possible. That might seem like, how's that the case? I mean, in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, Krishna says in many places, this place is Dukhalayam Ashashvatam, Asukam, Anicham, Janma Mrityu, Jaravyadi, Dukkha Dosh, Anudarshanam. We should be seeing the faults of repeated birth, death, old age, disease. But here we see actually it is possible, as close as possible anyway, to get heaven on earth. And how is that possible? Only if there's a very dharmic situation. Dharmic situation means a king that is ruling according to the rules of Dharma prescribed in Shastra, and citizens also following. Even in the world of politics, maybe the initial aim is to create heaven on earth, or as much of heaven for as many people as possible. And so there's different schools of thought. You have communism, you have capitalism, you even have monarchy. But unless all of these things are tied up with Vedic culture, they will fall short. Communism is basically when the Shudras want to be in control. Capitalism is when the Vaishyas want to be in charge. Monarchy is when the so-called Kshatriyas of Kali Yuga want to be in charge. In Vedic culture, there is monarchy, but Vedic monarchy is a little bit different, because in Vedic monarchy, the Brahmanas and Brahminical principles, those principles that bring us close to the absolute truth, those principles and those personalities, they're actually in charge. And those principles are facilitated and protected by the Kshatriyas like Maharaj Yudhisthira. That is why there's Vedic culture in the time when Maharaj Yudhisthira was ruling, because Maharaj Yudhisthira was the perfect dharmic king. And the citizens were also following perfectly. And even if they weren't following, because the king was very heavy in following Dharma, they had to follow. And so essentially, as Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport, there's an abundance of rain, not just an abundance, but regulated rain. The earth is very lush and flourishing, producing an abundance of natural fruits. The cows are eating the grass, and therefore, because they're being well protected, they're very happy and they're producing milk in abundance as well. Srila Prabhupada also writes that Indra, the demigod of rain, he also has to obey when everyone on earth is following dharmically as well. So this system is there. This is the only way that we could have something close to heaven on earth. And when we don't, which is basically 21st century Kali Yuga, and it's been the last few centuries in Kali Yuga as well, then we don't have these things. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter, Anad Bhavanti Bhutani Pajanyad Anasambhava Yagnad Bhavati Pajanyo Yagna Kama Samudbhavaha. That actually living entities, they subsist on anna, on grains. And grains, they're produced from pajanya, from rains. But rains only come about from yagna. And yagna is born of duty. So this is the cycle that one has to respect. And this is actually where rain comes from. Rain ultimately comes from the living entities performing prescribed duty from the Vedas. And as Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, this is basically the balance between, and he writes, conscious cooperation between man and gods and man and nature. And that's been exemplified by Maharaj Yudhisthira. So, one common objection to this is actually we see rain is happening everywhere, anywhere. I mean, maybe not on deserts, but generally speaking, we have rain. And we have rain in many nations that are predominantly atheistic, or maybe at least agnostic and very materialistic. Definitely, we don't see any kings like Maharaj Yudhisthira nowadays doing yagyas and being dharmic and protecting cows. Like, not even in Mother India do we see that to some extent anyway. So it seems like we're still getting rain, and it's coming independently of yagya. So how is that the case? So it's a question, it's an interesting question. There's many points of view on this. But we can look at this, like the rain that's being produced now is not the same quality of rain. We've got things like acid rain that's eroding things. The soil is like, devoid of any minerals. We're having to put like artificial fertilizer and like pesticides on the fruits. And often most nations, they're having to import produce. So most of the fruits and stuff that we have is not actually born and bred in the country that we live in. It's coming from somewhere else. But here we see in Maharaj Yudhisthira's land and in any Vedic king, if you read any Vedic king that's following the Vedas, it's always described how their kingdoms were flourishing, they were self-sufficient, there was an abundance of rain that was producing every type of harvest, every type of crop, every type of fruit. So that city, that state, that country was fully self-sufficient, not having to import anything from anywhere else, not dependent on anything else, which is completely different from what we see here nowadays, that we're having to import everything. Most of us here are sort of from an Indian background. I hate to break it to you, but most of the things that we're cooking, the sabjis, they're not created in England. They're being imported from somewhere else. That's slightly a little bit more dharmic. So the idea is when we know exactly what's happening and how it's happening, that's the start of human life, karma kanda. When we don't know what's going on, that's called vikami life. And that's pretty much essentially animal life, that we don't understand what's happening in front of us, we don't inquire. And then what happens is we start acting on the platform of animals, actually even worse than animals. And there's repercussions of unnatural living, because human beings aren't supposed to live like animals. We're supposed to live like human beings, understanding what the nature of something is and what is going on beyond the scenes. So then what happens is Srila Prabhupada outlines for us, we start living for the senses. And as a result of living for the senses, we start exploiting Mother Earth, both at an individual level and at a collective level, through just increased want for sense gratification, leading to greed, anger, lust, and ambitions to control on a major level. We often hear this example that if Krishna could remove all the pollution from the land, from the sea, from the air, how long would it last for? And generally it wouldn't last long, because, you just get someone going to McDonald's, coming out with their milkshake and then not finding a bin, and then let me just throw this in the street, right? Because the idea is we're polluted in the mind, polluted in the hearts, and we don't want to live in line with Mother Nature and Krishna's laws. That's the sad truth of it. This is the case not just now, but also in the past as well. Today is the appearance day of Lord Varahadev, the boar incarnation of Vishnu. normally we sing like Keshava Dvita Narahari Rupa, but in that bhajan there's Keshava Dvita Sukara Rupa, that the Lord comes in the form of Sukara or boar. And the Lord comes for a couple of reasons. In the first Manvantara, Swayambhuva Manvantara, at the start of creation, the earth was submerged in the Garbhodaka ocean. And so Brahma, thinking about what to do, as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as he's thinking, then from one of his nostrils, a little ball comes the size of a thumb and then expands, like it becomes completely massive, goes, its size is all the way up to Brahmaloka. And then it dives in and it retrieves the earth. But the other Varahadev that comes as well is Rakta Varahadev, or red-colored Varahadev. Sometimes it's also described as sham and dark as color as well. And so why does he appear? He appears essentially for the same reason, but also to annihilate a demon called Hiranyaksha. So Hiranyaksha, as his name implies, Hiranya is gold and Aksha means eye. So one who's got the eye for gold, he's got real extreme material vision. And he was basically plundering the earth. And in plundering the earth, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, he dislodges the earth, he unbalances the earth, and the earth goes into the Garbhodaka ocean. There's also like another explanation in the Nisimha Purana as well. The Nisimha Purana explains that Hiranyaksha, because at that time Hiranyaksha and his brother Hiranyakashipu, they were trying to dominate the demigods. So we spoke about Karma Khan, meaning like knowing what's happening, what's creating Mother Earth, what's controlling the laws of nature. Every law means that there's a lawmaker. So therefore, if we have Mother Nature or the laws of nature, we have those entities that control the laws of nature, and they're the demigods. But sometimes you have demons like Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu who want to take the power of the demigods, and they want to be all-powerful themselves. They want to be like God, essentially. And so Hiranyaksha, at one point when he was thinking about how to subdue the demigods for good, he started thinking that the people living on earth, they're performing sacrifices, yagyas, to the demigods. And these yagyas essentially sustain the demigods and maintain their prowess. And you can even increase their prowess as well. So in order to combat that, the Nisimha Purana says Hiranyaksha, he took away the potency that keeps the earth in orbit. And by taking that potency away, as a result, consequently, the earth fell down into the Garbhodaka ocean. So even we see like atheists do this, that they deny karma kanda, even knowing full well. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that there's 4 classes of entities that do not approach him. Namam duskritano mudda prapadyante naradama mayaya prahita cheta asuram bhavam ashritaha. So the idea is like there's 4 categories he's described as miscreants. Mudda means those people that are working too hard to really think beyond the carrot at the end of the stick, like a mudda, like an ass. And then you have naradama, which is the lowest of all men. They're basically, whereas the first category is too busy, the second category has no interest. And then we have mayaya pahrita jnana. So those people whose intelligence, their jnana, is stolen by maya. So they could be very, very smart, very intelligent, but just at the last stage, Maya grabs their intelligence and takes them towards the wrong conclusion. And then we have asuras, those people that are envious of Krishna. So the idea is when we have knowledge, when we're enlightened to some degree, we realize that there are higher powers beyond us. But when we don't have knowledge, when we have ignorance in whatever way that manifests, then basically we don't recognize that higher power beyond us, or we're too busy to want to be interested, or we could be very smart but led to the wrong conclusions, or we're just too envious. Actually, we want to deny what's reality. it's a little bit like, you know, the scientists, when they look at this earth, they look at the rain, they look at the water cycle, and they think, okay, the reason why there's rain is because there's plants, there's trees. And if we've got more plants and more trees, then we're destroying them, then there'll be more rain and everything will be okay. So this is like limited knowledge. It's true, but at a very like superficial level, at a very limited level. It's a little bit kind of like if you've got a child and the child is playing with a toy soldier, and the toy soldier is just in the middle of the room. The child comes in, the toy soldier's right there, doesn't know where it came from. And in the efforts of trying to work out what's going on with this toy soldier, how does it move, how does it switch on, the kid realizes there's an on button, and then it realizes if it says start, the soldier starts walking, and if it says stop, the soldier stops walking, and if it says a few other things, the soldier does a few other, like, you know, requests or orders, basically. And so in the child's mind, it's just thinking, okay, it's just like a toy soldier here, and it works if I turn on the on button, and if I say a few things, it will move accordingly, and that's basically it. That's a toy soldier. But like the little kid, because it's little, it doesn't understand, well, my father brought this toy soldier here, and the toy soldier was made by someone who programmed it to work in a certain way. And this is why we have a toy soldier here, and this is why it's following my orders, following my requests. So in the same way, the scientists, the people whose jnana have been stolen by Maya, the Asuras, the Mudas, the Naradamas, they're spiritual infants in the same way that kid is an infant. Because they're spiritual infants, they're looking at this world in the same way a devotee looks at this world, but their conclusions are drastically different and are just based from their point of view, looking up. Whereas Srimad Bhagavatam is from Krishna's point of view, looking down to us and giving us that point of view. One point of view is the worm's eye point of view, where everything from the worm looks massive, and, you know, and the bird's eye point of view is the actual reality of what's going on and what's there. So then what we need to make sure is that we don't fall foul, that we don't also play into these hands of not recognizing the reality of the situation. And it's very, very easy to do. Krishna says earlier to that verse in the 3rd chapter I quoted, that if one who has these gifts but doesn't recognize them and doesn't offer these gifts to the demigods, then they are stenaha, or they're a thief. And so he's referring to pretty much most of the population, that we enjoy the fruits of Mother Earth that have been given to us due to our karmic balance. And when we take these and don't recognize where it's coming from and pay due dividends for that, then what happens? We're essentially, Krishna labels us as a thief. If you look at this word thief, it has certain connotations to it. A thief is someone who takes and takes and takes without paying anything back. A thief has a very exploitative mentality, a carefree mentality, one that's free of responsibility, accountability. And a thief also has no sense of gratitude. It just takes, and then, you know, it's mine. What are you going to do about it? Like, no one needs to know. The opposite of that is a mentality of understanding where things come from, recognizing that and being appreciative. It's essentially like a mentality of gratitude. So nowadays, like, this attitude of gratitude is like all the rage. All of these lifestyle coaches are talking about this, being grateful for the moment, being grateful for having air to breathe, keeping a gratitude journal. But originally, this idea of gratitude was there also. It's a Shastric thing. It's not nothing new that's being created that we had to look outside of Srimad Bhagavatam and Vedic culture for. In fact, there's a Sanskrit word for gratitude, kritagya, krita and gya together. So krita means to cultivate. Krita means to cultivate. And gya means a consciousness of knowing. So it's very interesting when you think about it. Krita and gya is cultivating a consciousness of knowing, because actually gratitude means to know what's around us, what supports us, and only then you can really appreciate and be grateful. Like for the devotee, there could be kritagya, they could be grateful because they know their entrance into bhakti wasn't really dependent on them. It was dependent on the devotees, it was dependent on Shastra, and ultimately, beyond all of these things, it was dependent on Krishna and on the super soul as well. So the idea is, from a spiritual point of view, one can only be kritagya when they know what is happening around them and beyond them. So not just around them, everyone's doing that. Even the materialist knows what's around them, but also what's beyond them as well. His Grace Aindra Prabhu, when he used to be here with us, he gave this example of the lion and the dog mentality. So the idea is, when you have a dog and you throw the dog a bone, as the saying goes, then what happens is the dog will look at the bone and just bite the bone and carry on. I mean, it's just worried about the bone, right? It's not worried about anything else. But if you throw a lion the same bone, then what happens? The lion will look at the bone and then it will look at where the bone came from, i.e. from you, who threw the bone, and it will run after you. It will leave the bone behind. So in the same way, we could have either a dog consciousness or a lion consciousness. And as devotees, we've got to always cultivate this knowing of how Krishna is there behind the scenes. So for most people, those four categories of people, they have the dog mentality that the bone, the fruit of their desires gets thrown to them. And when it gets thrown to them, they just bite into it and take it away, and they're just happy with that. But the lion-like devotee, what they do is they look at where all of these things are coming from. So it's coming to me from my karma, and beyond my karma, ultimately, it's coming to me by Krishna. And the reason why Krishna is doing this is because of my ignorance. It's because of my disconnection with him and my forgetfulness of my nature as being his servant. And instead, I'm trying to lord it over material nature and play the role of Krishna here. And that's why all my problems are happening, and all the problems in the world keep going on, keep perpetuating as well. So this idea of kritagya, of all knowing and therefore being grateful, that's also there for the demigods as well. We've spoken in these purports about Indradev, and how he's part of this system of karma kand. And but also, even like great devotees like Indra can also forget. They could also stop being kritagya, like having that cultivating that consciousness of knowing Krishna's hand behind everything. And we see this in so many leelas, in Krishna Leela, in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. Just because we've spoken about Indradev and rain here, we'll sort of revisit that pastime of the Govardhan Leela, where the Rajavasis, they're basically wanting to do a yajna in honor of Indra because he's supplying so much rain. And because of the rain, they have lush green grass, they have everything they could eat, and the cows are so happy. So why wouldn't you? But to set an example and to give us a lesson, Krishna started sharing his wisdom, and ultimately, in a sweet way, he was speaking the wisdom, and just through the sweetness, the madhurya of his personality, the Vrajavasis headed by Nanda agreed, actually, let's not worship Indra this time around. Let's worship Govardhan, because Krishna is saying Govardhan is giving us everything, not Indra. Indra is just obliged to do what he's supposed to do. And so they started doing that famous yajna for Govardhan Hill. And, you know, as the Leela goes, Krishna expands. He also forms Govardhan, or part of Govardhan, and he accepts all their offering. And in the next scene of the Leela, what happens is Indra finds out and he becomes extremely angry. Pride cometh before the fall, as they say. And so what happens is he sends the Samvataka crowds, the clouds of devastation, to Vrindavan, and they start raining like no man's business, like the time of devastation. And Krishna famously lifts up like the hill. As we sing, like Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavalabha Giri Vadadari. So he lifts up Giri Govardhan, and all the residents are there. But you know, it's interesting. We hear about this pastime, and many acharyas comment that actually, even though Indra is there and he's such a powerful personality, and he's empowered to oversee the weather, to oversee the rain in particular, and the clouds, that even though the clouds of devastation are there, Krishna doesn't allow one blade of grass to be affected by the wind and the rain from those clouds. What's also interesting, one might say, well, okay, there's Govardhan Hill and Krishna's lifted Govardhan Hill, but what about the area outside of Govardhan Hill? Wouldn't there still be torrential rain and floods going on there? So some acharyas also say, actually, as soon as the rain hit the ground, Krishna just to evaporate, to disappear. And so after, when Krishna puts Govardhan Hill back in its place effortlessly, there's no like devastation, there's no floods, there's no damage to take care of. You know, there wasn't anything in the first place. So in this pastime, even Indra was forced to develop that consciousness of Kritagya, to cultivate this understanding that actually the person that sanctions the potency in my ability is Krishna. It's not independent of Krishna. We hear like in the Bhagavad Gita, Shabda Ke Purusham Nushu. Krishna says, I'm the sound in the ether and I'm in that. I think there's some sound coming from someone's screen potentially. So if devotees can mute, that would be great. So yes, like I said, so therefore Krishna was forcing Indra also to develop that consciousness of knowing the reality. In one sense, that pastime was to bring all the residents of Vrindavan together, so all the rasas could take place under one umbrella, metaphorically speaking. But also Krishna arranged that pastime for his devotee Indra, because perhaps he sensed that Indra was becoming a bit puffed up, a bit proud. And therefore, even though he knew the truth, because Krita is a cultivation, gratitude is a cultivation, it's something we have to be conscious of. Krishna consciousness isn't just automatic, it's a cultivation. He was also through that Govardhan Leela reminding Indra what's what, and therefore helping him as a devotee to cultivate the mentality of knowing the right things. So when one enters that state of Kritagya, of all-knowing, what happens in the final analysis is we end up seeing beyond the demigods, beyond the devas, to Krishna's hand in everything, in our lives, beyond our lives as well. And when we start trying to actively cultivate that type of consciousness, amazing things then start to happen. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yomam pashyati sabatra, sabacha mai pashyati, tashyaham na pranashyami, sacha me na pranashyati. That one who sees everything in me and sees me everywhere, that person is not lost, nor am I ever lost to him. So it's quite interesting in this verse, in the 6th chapter, Krishna says, firstly, that I am not lost to that person. So the idea is that if we try to cultivate seeing how Krishna, he's there in everything as Paramatma, his hand is there, or his sanction is there in everything that happens in my life and in everyone's life, good or bad, supposedly good or bad. When we try and connect everything to Krishna, then actually Krishna is never lost. Even though we're in the material world, even though those people around us may be very materially based, still, even in this place, Krishna could be there. I think it's Jiva Goswami gives one definition for Maya. He defines Maya as that place where Krishna apparently appears to be absent. That place where Krishna apparently appears to be absent. So the idea is for a devotee, Krishna is everywhere. Starbor dongom na dekana murti. So the idea is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that whether something is moving or non-moving, starbor jongom, actually when a devotee sees that form, everywhere he sees actually Krishna's spurti, Krishna's manifestation is there. Everything reminds him of Krishna. In the second part of the verse though, Sacha mena pranashati, Krishna says, more importantly, that that person who cultivates that type of mentality, that consciousness, he is never lost to me. This word Kritagya, being grateful, is also there in the Mahabharata. We've been speaking about Bhishma the last few weeks as well. So what happens in the Mahabharata when Vishnu is there, when Bhishma is there and he's lying on the bed of arrows, I believe, then we have those 1,000 names of Vishnu, the Vishnu Sahasranam that's been recited by Bhishma. And I was having a look, it's quite interesting. One of the names that Bhishma calls Vishnu is also Kritagya. So gratitude, being grateful, Bhishma also calls Vishnu Kritagya. So how is this the case? We see the devotee, we see people to different degrees might be cultivating a mentality, a consciousness of knowing the absolute truth to different degrees. The devotee has the full Kritagya of knowing that beyond the demigods, beyond the avatars, ultimately is Krishna as the fountainhead of everything. But here we see a couple of aspects to this word Kritagya when it's being given to Vishnu rather than to Jiva Tattva. Of course, we know Vishnu, Krishna. By definition, God is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, knows everything that's going on. Of course, everything is going on under Krishna's will by definition because he's God. So in that sense, he is Kritagya. He doesn't even need to do Krita. He doesn't need to cultivate it. He's Gya. He knows. He's got the consciousness of knowing everything. As Prabhupada used to say, not even a blade of grass moves without the sanction of the Lord. But another reason why Krishna is called Kritagya or grateful is despite being aware of every single thing that's going on in this universe, every single thing that's going on in every single universe in this material sphere. It's described how this earth, this universe is like one seed in a whole bag of mustard seeds. So Krishna knows everything that's going on everywhere, from Brahma all the way down to the tiny ant, down to the microbe. Krishna knows everything. Still, despite knowing everything, Krishna makes an effort of cultivating a relationship with his own devotees, being completely aware of Kritagya, of how his devotees are trying their best to connect with Krishna through their body, their minds, and their words at all times. We see a very beautiful example of this in the Mahabharata, when after the war finishes, Krishna is staying with Maharaj Yudhisthira in his camp for a few days. And then one day, Maharaj Yudhisthira, he enters and then he sees that Krishna is meditating. And he's absolutely astounded, and he speaks aloud without realizing that the supreme personality of the Godhead is here in my home and he's meditating. Who could he possibly be meditating on? He's the supreme. What does he need to meditate? Who could he be meditating on? So as he says this aloud in astonishment, then what happens is Krishna opens his eyes and he smiles and he says, who am I meditating on? I'll tell you. I am meditating on that illustrious son of King Shantanu, that illustrious personality that made such a great vow that in the presence of so many beautiful women in palace life, that he would stay celibate, he would never marry, and he would never take position onto the throne. I am meditating on that illustrious personality that was more or less invincible on the battlefields. I'm meditating on that illustrious personality, Bhishma, who is in so much pain on the bed of arrows, but despite being in so much pain in that precarious position, he is meditating upon me, and therefore he's forcing me to meditate upon him. So this is Krishna. This is the beauty of worshiping Krishna beyond anything else, that Krishna is not just expecting us to be just knowing that he's the boss, he's in charge, that we need to bow down to him, and then we can keep him happy like Indra. But he's beyond Indra, he's beyond the devas, he's beyond any material position. He doesn't need anything. But still, despite that, he's daily, moment by moment, trying to cultivate a relationship with us because we're trying to cultivate a relationship with him. To that degree that we cultivate that relationship, to that degree, Krishna says, that he also commits to us as well and takes steps to us. So I'm aware I'm almost running out of time, so I'll quickly wrap up. So the point I was trying to make is also, as devotees, therefore, we need to constantly connect the dots in our lives at every moment, actively try and be conscious of Krishna in our life, Krishna's hand in our life. And in that way, we could also be Kritagya. We could cultivate this idea of knowing how Krishna is behind everything. behind every milestone in our spiritual life, and also trying to encourage us behind every obstacle and every setback in our life. If we want Krishna in our life, we also have to be grateful that he's already there. And then in that state of Krishna consciousness, knowing how Krishna is behind everything, that type of transcendental gratitude, that will also make Krishna Kritagya very much want to be a part of our lives. And for us as devotees, how do we do that in Kali Yuga? We're very fortunate that we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to guide us. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when he went to Gaya and got initiated by Ishwara Puri, that was like a big milestone, a turning point to when he turned from Nimai the Pandit to Nimai the Bhakta. And so when he came back, he was just a completely different person. All the devotees weren't afraid of him trying to debate. He actually wanted to do service for devotees. And in the Adi Leela, excuse me, it's described how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking to one of his associates, Shuklamba Brahmachari, and he says that, very famous verse, Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, that there's no other way, no other way, no other way. Anya gate anyata. There's no other way apart from the chanting of the names of Lord Hari. And he mentions that 3 times. And then he says how in this age of Kali, Krishna's name is the avatar of Krishna. And then he says to Shuklam Brahmachari, Sharanam loibo jota labate shantosh, eito acha kore bhakti dharma posh. That one should always shada, take this holy name and chant it. And whatever comes in their life, labate shantosh, just be completely satisfied. And if one just does this thing, with these 2 things, if they just keep up their chanting and just be satisfied with what happens in their life, just like take it on the chin, good or bad, it is what it is, it's Krishna's hands, then that is the etiquette or the achar which maintains their practice in bhakti. So if we could really try and understand that and keep things very simple, and therefore minimize all the distractions in our life, the things that unnecessarily divert our attention away from understanding Krishna's position, then we have a real shot of becoming Krishna's pure devotee, perhaps even in this lifetime. So just to summarize, we spoke a bit about from the verses how it is possible to some degree in a mortal way to create heaven on earth. And that is by having a dharmic situation, ideally having a Vedic monarchy where the king is someone like Maharaj Yudhisthira who's following all the Krishna conscious principles. The citizens are always following. And in that way, we have adequate rainfall, which leads to abundance of crops and happy cows that are protected also by such a pious king. And if we don't do that, then this is why we have all the problems, both on an individual and a collective level in Kali Yuga right now. And then we also spoke about how it's the start of human life to realize that beyond the laws of nature is the lawgiver, and that there's a system. And if we don't recognize that, then Krishna calls us a thief. And when we do recognize that, that's the start of human life. And then we spoke a bit about this idea of being grateful, therefore. The opposite of having the thief-like mentality is to have a mentality of gratitude. And then from a Sanskrit point of view, gratitude is called kritagya, or to cultivate, to actively cultivate a consciousness of knowing. And then we see from past times like the Govardhan Leela, how we need to know that there's a system that's governed by the demigods, but ultimately beyond the demigods, there's Krishna as well. And how anyone can be a miscreant from the 4 categories we spoke about, Muddha, Naradama, Mayaya, Prahitagyana, and Asuras, that these can apply to any living entity, even up to someone as high as Indra, because they have to be actively cultivating this knowing, this connection with Krishna. And so what to speak of people like us. And then we spoke about how Kritagya or gratitude is not just on our side, but Krishna or Vishnu is also known as Kritagya, because despite the knowing and being the hand behind all the cosmic workings in this world, he is also grateful that the devotees are trying to connect to him in so many ways. And we gave the example of Bhishma Dev on the bed of arrows. And so we also need to take that example and these points and really seriously try and see Krishna in our life at all times. Okay, I've gone over time. Hare Krishna. I'll hand it over to Karuna Chaitanya Prabhu.
Prabhu, there is a question in chat box.
Oh, sorry. You know, I'm really forgetful. Okay, yeah, so if any devotees have any questions, we have some amazing devotees assembled here with us. I'm sure we could discuss. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute, or you could type it in the chat if you'd rather do that. Okay, so Seva Priya Mataji. Oh, sorry, that's a private message. Pradimna Prabhu. Okay. What is the connection between gratitude? Sorry, excuse me. What's the connection between gratitude or lack of and envy? This is a nice question. What's the connection between gratitude and envy? You can analyze these things in the modes, actually, Prabhu, as well. You know, someone who's in the mode of goodness, pure goodness, or approaching that, when they see someone who's well-to-do, who has some opulences, be it yogic or material, or, you know, just like doing quite well, they've got good karmic balance. They look at those things and they appreciate the person. They appreciate the person. Like, okay, let me give you a more worldly example. Say if you've got someone who's walking out and he's wearing I don't know if Versace is still in fashion nowadays. It was back in my day. Wearing a Versace suit, wearing I don't know, a Rolex watch or something like that. Someone who's in a mode of goodness doesn't get affected by it. And they'll just think, oh, this person's worked very hard to get these things. Like, you know, must be a pious person. And they'll just be, you know, they'll be appreciative of the person on his own merits. Someone who's in the mode of passion, if they see that same person wearing the Versace suit and the Rolex watch, they will think, actually, you know what? I want that. So they become jealous. Jealousy is when you want something that someone else has. So like, you know, I also want a Rolex watch. Why not me? Okay. And then someone in the mode of ignorance, they will see that same person wearing the Rolex watch and the suit, and they will think, you know what? I don't care if I get the thing or not, but this person, they definitely shouldn't be wearing a watch. They don't deserve it. They don't deserve this suit. They don't deserve this watch. And you know what? I'm gonna steal it. And even if, you know, I'll even smash the watch in their face. You know, sometimes you get people, I used to go to quite a rough school when I was in secondary school in Southwest London. And some of the boys, they were really bad. And if somebody had parked like their Mercedes car, BMW, or some like more expensive car, they would get their key and just like, you know, just strike a line into it, damage the car basically. So they'd have to get a new paint job or whatever. It was commonplace in Southwest London. It's you know, bananas. But now you might think, well, what's that going to do? If you key someone's car, you don't get their car. You don't get to drive their car. It doesn't make your life any better. But it is purely that philosophy that why should this person get to enjoy this and not me? And therefore, if I can't work hard and get it because I'm jealous, I'm just going to make sure at the very least, they don't get to enjoy it. So this is from the basis of the modes, Prabhu, the connection between appreciation or gratitude, perhaps, and jealousy and envy. Jealousy is when you desire what other people have, and envy is more destructive form of jealousy. That whether you get it or not, but nobody else should enjoy if I can't enjoy it. So I don't know if that's okay, Pradima Prabhu. You could like reply, yeah. Okay. Pradima Prabhu is very humble. Actually, I've got much to learn from Pradima Prabhu. Does anyone have any other questions that they want to type in or ask? I don't have much realization of these points. It's just like stuff I came up with. You know, I also need to realize, but hopefully the class made sense for everyone. But feel free, if you've either got a question or you just want to share something, a realization, you're more than welcome to.
Hare Krishna. How can we cultivate a life full of more gratitude?
Who's that, Manisha? Is that Manisha? I can't hear. Your
Yes.
sound.
Sorry, I'm driving. What practical steps can we do to cultivate a more grateful lifestyle?
Okay, what practical steps can we implement to, have become more grateful? Manisha is one of our inquisitive scholars from the School of Bhakti, the College of Vedic Studies congregation. She's very, very inquisitive. So thank you for joining, Manisha. I think so. Like in the world today, there are things that even material people do, and it's things that we can actually learn from. And then there's things that we have that are on top of that as well. So generally, like most people nowadays who are not even necessarily religious or spiritual, they try and sit down and be appreciative or make a list of things that they should appreciate in their life. And that concept's also there in Karmakand, that we should appreciate what our forefathers have done for us. We should appreciate what our parents have done for us and then show respect. We should be appreciative to all the living entities and therefore try and feed some of them every day. We should be appreciative to the other people in society and therefore give in charity. So all of these Vedic acts are there to help force us to become more conscious, to be grateful to those people in our family and beyond the family as well. And by doing these things, they also help us ascend up the yoga ladder by giving up attachments. So if you've got a lot of money and you're giving in charity, once you give that money away, you can't be attached to it anymore. So these things have to be done consciously, and then we can naturally become more aware of what's happening around us on a daily basis, in fact, not just sort of on an annual basis or a festive or seasonal basis like that. As devotees, though, we understand that we're watering the root of the tree, and we're doing that by serving Krishna. So we don't need to there's no harm in doing these other things, but at the same time, one's not obliged to the demigods, to the forefathers, or anything on that level if one is doing pure unalloyed bhakti. So the idea is we should be spending some time reflecting, or even if we're praying, but trying to pray more deeply, praying every day to Krishna that we're very grateful to have the association of the devotees, very grateful to have the association of Shastra, grateful to have mentors, grateful to have the concept of prasadam. Every day when we're eating prasadam, we should be saying those prasadam prayers. And if we're reflective of the lyrics, the meaning of the words, actually it is thanking Krishna, that otherwise without prasadam, Bhoga would just lead us into a network of repeated birth and death. So I think, Manisha, we have all of these things at our disposal, but we have to become more conscious of what we're doing to really get the benefit of these things. And if we're really doing that on a daily basis, it's very difficult not to be grateful to Krishna for everything he's done. So all the things that we've been talking about in the Sanghas and all like the limbs of bhakti, all the prayers of the Vaishnava Acharyas, all the Shastra, if you look at it, actually every single devotee is grateful. Every single pure devotee doesn't think anything of themselves. Every pure devotee realizes that they're only relying on unconditional mercy of Krishna, that they have no material qualification at their disposal that qualifies them in bhakti. So when we really make an effort to reflect on these on a daily basis, or even a moment by moment basis, then we can be grateful, not just at the material level that, yes, there are people around me helping me, but ultimately that Krishna is there, he's in my life and he's helping me. And if we make sure, unlike Indra, that we think about that on a daily basis, it's difficult to fall astray of that. And if we're around devotees that remind us of that, of our dependence on Krishna, our willing dependence on Krishna as well, then also we can also be Kritagya as well. Is that okay, Manisha?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any devotees wants to share any realizations before we go? I'm looking at all the devotees here are very elevated, but we have got some more senior experienced devotees as well. So if anybody would like to share, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we could finish for today. Okay, I think it seems like nobody has any other comments. So, Karuna Chaitanya Prabhu, shall I leave it to you?
Yes, bro. Thank you so much for beautiful class, especially on the word Kritagnya and the mood and also the beautiful story of Krishna, how he reciprocates. It's not just he's looking for love from us, but he also reciprocates the same way. Thank you so much. And I also thank everyone for participating. And next week, we will have another wonderful speaker from India this time. His Grace Amoglila Prabhu. So I request everyone to tune in and get benefited. Thank you so much once again, Santanu Prabhu. His Grace Santanu Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna. And also just a reminder that today we're celebrating Lord Nityananda's appearance day at school. So please do everyone try come for that. It should be a fun festival. Hare Krishna.